Hello, I'm Lisa Harrison, and today I'm talking to Mark Darwin, Aussie founder of Truthology.com.au. Is that right, Mark?
That's correct. No, sorry, it's
Or
.org.au.
.org.au. Okay.
Yes.
And Mark, I have to say that wish the Truthology was around about 18 months ago when I first dug my way down this particular rabbit warren.
Yeah.
It would have shortened my learning curve by a good 6 months. So I'm very grateful that you've put this together. But before we explain what Truthology is and what it is you're trying to achieve, I want to talk a little bit about your background prior to Truthology,
Yep.
professionally. Who were you? What were you doing?
Uh, well, probably best to go back to my childhood, where where our parents mucked us up. I'm just kidding. Uh, I was brought up in a house of tyranny. I would say my father was a very strict, old school man, and he drove into me from a very early age the importance of status and money and education and your career and your position in life. And so I went to, a private school, and the whole time my father drove me, not from a position of from love, from a position of fear. You will succeed, or there will be repercussions. So it's interesting that I think when we're born beautiful babies, we think that our parents are God. They're all
Mm.
that we know. They feed us, they house us, and so we accept everything as gospel. And then as we grow up, we see their infallibilities, and so I saw a lot of those from an early age. My mother was a chronic alcoholic, and there was a lot of things that I started questioning from an early age, which I'm actually now very grateful for. Certainly not wanting to sound like a victim. I'm actually now extremely grateful because from an early age, I started asking lots of questions around why. And I think, when we do our workshops, that's one of the things that I ask people to do is just pretend they're 4 years old for the day. Because what does a 4 year old ask all day long that drives you crazy is why.
Why?
Um,
But it all makes sense in hindsight, doesn't it? When you look back and you see the foundations that laid for who you are and
yes,
where you are at.
yeah, absolutely. So I left school and became a chef. Then within a few years had my own restaurant up here in Brisbane in 1988. If you remember, in 88 was Expo 88, so I had
Hmm.
a massive restaurant here. But that was probably my first little downfall that happened at an early age, 21 I think I was, because what happened was I opened it 6 months before Expo, and then when Expo started, all the restaurants around town died. Nobody saw it coming. Expo became its own little city, and everybody that visited, including the locals, took their friends, and Expo took all the business. So I lost that restaurant. I didn't lose a whole amount of money, but I lost a fair bit of pride, and so that was great. But look, I got a job in real estate there. There was some people from LJ Hooker that used to eat at the restaurant. They gave me a job in real estate. So I think, Lisa, most people have done some hospitality and some real estate somewhere along the line, haven't they?
Well, I
I,
can I can add to the hospitality. Yeah.
yeah, most people have done something there. Um, and look, real estate was a fantastic way to enter business because it was in the late 80s. Things were absolutely booming up here in Queensland. And that changed really quickly. We went from booming to bust in a matter of weeks, and everyone should remember that because that's what's going to happen again when it happens. It's going to happen very quickly. So interest rates went, I'm sure you remember, to 19, 20, and 21%,
Yes, I
uh,
do.
and the market just crashed.
The recession we
And
had to have.
yes, and I'll ask everyone to think now. Imagine if interest rates went to 19 or 20% now. I mean, it's just you can't even contemplate that
Not
that happening.
not with the. I mean,
But
the housing prices of since the late '80s have,
mm,
gone through the roof.
yeah,
Having a $200,000 or $300,000 mortgage back then at 18 to 21% was one thing. Having a $700,000 or $800,000 mortgage, as people have got now, at 18 to 20%, that's a whole other ballgame.
absolutely,
Mm.
absolutely. So real estate was great, but when the market crashed, I then went to Sydney. I got offered a job with Bond Media, Alan Bond,
Hmm.
and put in Movie Link to all the 4 and 5 star hotels. I don't know. I'm sure most people have seen Movie Link in there now. So we did that, which was great. Then the Bond empire crashed because Alan was buying $20 million paintings with shareholders' money and all that sort of stuff. And I have to say, as an insider there was no accountability in that firm, none. I mean, I was a 22-year-old, and they said, "Here's your wage," which was ridiculous, and no expense accounts had to be put in, nothing, crazy stuff. But the bad 80s, the big bad 80s. And then from there, I went to AV Jennings, the proud old builder. and went into their finance division. And that's where I started to get a bit of an understanding on finance and how money works. And then got headhunted to Aussie Home Loans and was there from the early days. And that was that was a fantastic opportunity to be part of a company that was a fledgling company to when I left, it was a household name, and it was an extremely exciting time to be part of that. But it was in that time that I started to question a lot of things about money. I understood interest and I understood the term of a loan and amortization and capitalism and how things could work theoretically. But I don't know if you know, Lisa, Aussie pioneered securitized lending in Australia. And securitized lending is where you establish a bond. Okay, so without being too boring here, just picture a bond as a warehouse. And we would say, look, we're going to build a $300 million warehouse. We'd fill that warehouse full of mortgages. So we'd go out and see the Mars and Pars and sign them up on their mortgages. And once we had 300 million in mortgages, we then go and sell that bond on the bond market. And I thought to myself at the time, chronologically, how did we do that? How did we have the money to give to these people to buy their houses and then go and sell that on the bond market? We didn't buy the bond and therefore have the money. And I said that to the powers that be there, and they said to me, welcome to the magic of banking. That was my first taste in understanding that they literally make money out of thin air. And then they go and sell it again on the bond market. So that was how securitized lending really took off in Australia, or the subprime market, which is responsible for a lot of the things that are going on right now. But I left Aussie and started a wealth creation company. And I know just before we went on air, you were talking about the fact that a lot of people in this industry have had some taste of working in the wealth industry. So that went fantastic. That was in the late 90s. And we were very fortunate in that we had a lot of the Aussie Home Loans guys send us a lot of business. And so the business went great guns. I sold out of that and went into retirement at the age of, how old was I? 32. And moved to the Gold Coast and bought a big waterfront home and motorbikes and started playing golf and got bored with that really quickly. And so my partner at the time had a business. She had quite a few sort of health stores around Surfers Paradise. And we created, I don't know if you remember 10 or 12 years ago, Lisa, bath bombs. And somehow or another, we presented to Woolies and Coles and got it into Woolies and Coles. And then it just went into everywhere. And we ended up with a big factory with 50 odd staff up here on the Gold Coast and then sending it overseas. And we then went into fundraising. Fundraising is a huge industry. And we designed a huge bath bomb that looked like a Toblerone. And we called it not a chocolate bomber blocker, like a lollygobble bliss bomb, something that the kids would struggle to get their heads around. So we had Grant Hackett as our ambassador for that, and we sent money to Kids Helpline. So it was just had a really good set of ingredients. We then franchised it, and that was the disaster for us. I think most of the things that I touched before that had turned to gold, but we sold 14 franchises in 3 months. And for anyone who's in business would know that that's far too many. So the business grew too quickly. And essentially, not to bore everybody, but within 18 months, it went from a multi-million-dollar, hugely successful business to totally imploding. And that's probably one of the times in my life where, as you said before, people seem to need to go through a dip. And, we have our successes and we have our shortfalls in life. And certainly for me, I've learned more about myself in those shortfalls at 2 o'clock in the morning when you're looking at yourself in the mirror going, how did this happen?
Mm-hmm.
See you acknowledging, I think most people have looked at themselves at 2 in the morning going, gee, everything was going so well. What happened? Anyway, look, that was a really tough time for me, Lisa. It was so much so that because my father had ingrained into me that success and status and money was everything, there's a few times I actually thought about checking out. I couldn't even face my family at the time and my friends. It was a very, very tough time. So I did what I did comfortably. We all go back to our comfort zone, don't we, I think, in times like that. So I went back to wealth creation and started a company that was really starting to go okay. And then I developed a brain tumor. And one of my favorite sayings is, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Mm-hmm. And so at that time, the medical industry told me they wanted to cut, burn and zap. Otherwise, I'd be gonski in 18 months to 2 years. But I've never really believed in the medical industry. I've got 4 kids. 3 of them were born at home. I delivered 3 of them at home. So I've really been into no immunisation and self-healing. And so at that time, very luckily met Don Tolman. I don't know if the people out there have heard of Don Tolman. He does a lot of healing with whole food
I'm very
and
aware of Don Tolman. I used to eat
oh, great.
pulse and all of that stuff. Yep.
Pulse, yeah, pulse. So I went totally vegetarian for 12 months, and I started sitting Vipassana meditation, which are 10-day retreats where you sit in silence. And without any medical intervention, I healed myself. And that was an extraordinarily empowering experience to know that I'm responsible. And so it's a lot of what we
Absolutely.
talk about now is self-responsibility, accepting oneself as cause. Where did the tumor come from? You know, it came from my activities, probably my diet, having too much of a mobile phone next to my head for hours on end, and I had to take responsibility for where that was at. But a few years after that, I went to a seminar. This was probably about 2.5 years ago. That was about sovereignty. So being independent and not reliant on a system. Although now we're learning that sovereignty is actually just the highest form of a slave. But a lot of people have a certain idea about what it is. But it was one of those seminars, Lisa, that the whole day my jaw was dropped. And I consider myself reasonably learned. I've read a lot. I've tried to I've attended every course under the sun, but this seminar was the biggest eye opener of my life, and it it really crystallized a lot of the public and private you that we'll probably talk a little bit about, the establishment of trusts that we're not aware of, and your birth certificate is a certificate, a warehouse receipt for that trust that you're not even the trustee of, the creation of money, the application of interest, and all these things. So it was a seminar where I got home that night. I couldn't sleep. I started spending 16 to 18 hours a day researching online and reading articles and papers. And I have to say, I went to a state of, I guess, mild depression for about 2 or 3 months. I had to walk away from the wealth creation company that I was involved with. I was the majority shareholder, and it was starting to go great guns. We had a really good relationship with Kids Helpline again, and my other partners thought I was mad. They, you know, here's this wealth creator who was with Oz in the heyday, and all of a sudden he's saying, the creation of money is evil. The way that they've applied it is not helpful for people. Capitalism is designed to fail, and so my business partners thought Mark's lost the plot.
Yeah.
uh, but I couldn't sit, Lisa, any longer and sell something that I knew was absolutely mathematically designed to fail. And interestingly, a lot of the people, and at the time, money wasn't so easy to get. Things were tightening up. This was 2 years ago, and so this was just before the GFC. And where people would have plenty of equity before and plenty of income, now things were really, really tight, and you could see things starting to contract. Look, I had four other business partners in that wealth creation company. We're all driving around in new Audis, looking like wankers. Sorry, I just said a naughty word, but I have to say that two of them, over time, have since started to research this information and now on board with it. But the other couple are, I think they intellectually understand that everything that, this truth movement has some legs, but they're in this really tormented space of still having to push forward with that and try and make that work. So
I think once people come across this information, and we'll get into detail, but the ones who can't go where you've gone, who can't really let go, are still coming from a very, I'm going to use, these terms, 3D ego space, because it's been ingrained to be on top, to be successful, to be better than. And we're all trained to judge ourselves by judging others and by comparison. So what I've noticed is it doesn't matter the level of education, it doesn't matter the academic and business kind of background and qualifications. If you can't go from a heart space, from a more spiritual perspective, then you don't really see the bigger picture in this. And that's what holds you there. Because all they're seeing is right here, right now, money is what counts. Not seeing the bigger picture of the fact that it's actually all coming down. It's all breaking down.
very quickly.
Very quickly.
Well,
And as we did talk about before we started recording, was that a common theme that I've noticed
in this, down this particular rabbit hole, is that there's two things really. One is that regardless of where people have come from, and a lot of people have come from wealth, they've lost everything.
Mm.
As it stands today, they've got very little, if nothing at all, or they're in big trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is watching them go through the stages of grief that are very similar to the stages of grief when you're told you have an illness or someone's about to die or has died. That initial one is disbelief. They cannot get their head around the fact that there is a system that is so, I want to say evil, because I think ultimately it is, that is so corrupt, that is so designed against you, that there's just disbelief.
Yeah.
Then there is anger, because you realise what a victim you've been of the system from the day you were born. Then there is some form of acceptance. And I watch people over and over and over again go through that cycle.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite, oh, you can almost set your clock by it.
Yes.
You know, come back and talk to me next week and I know where you'll be at.
Yeah.
You know.
I agree. Yeah, I think the school system has a lot to do with that. I mean,
absolutely.
You know, the school put you in uniforms, and uni means one. Then you go off to university, uni meaning one version of information. And you have to look at the his story, history that they shove down your throat. Well, whose story is it? It's the story that's designed to have good little tax-paying citizens come out and not question the system. So I think that's where most people end up. But you're absolutely right. We have a lot of clients come to us, Lisa, and I would say that I'm guessing here, about 80% of the clients come to us in extreme financial pain, about to lose their home, credit cards maxed out. And just to give you some figures, I think the record of one client alone coming to us had 268,000 in credit card debts, just in credit card debts. Then he had 2 car loans, one for he and one for his wife, and a few homes. The investment homes had 40 to 45% losses since he had purchased them, like they'd come back in price. Just an absolute mess, effectively bankrupt, as the system would see.
Mm.
You know, and we've had clients come to workshops and then go home and tell their friends. And one client rang us and said, I've got a friend who's in dire need. He really needs to come and see you guys. And 3 days later, that guy hung himself. He actually hung himself because he couldn't even face his wife that they were going to lose their house. And so this is what drives us to have people wake up to the fact that it's not even them that has the debt. Any spiritual leader or sage will tell you that we can't be indebted, and that's why they've created up this trust or this corporate you that has the debt, because we can't be indebted.